The communications room of the UNS Horizon's Edge hummed with quiet activity. Nari stood near the main display, her arms crossed as she watched the incoming transmission. The signal had traveled across half the galaxy, weak and desperate. It took 3 days just to clean up the static enough to understand the words. Captain Taiho entered the room, his boots clicking against the metal floor. He was a tall man with gray at his temples and eyes that had seen too many battles. He stopped beside Nari and watched the screen without speaking. The face on the display belonged to Ambassador Veltis of the Valerian Consortium. His species looked almost fragile to human eyes. Thin limbs, large eyes, adapted for their dim home star, skin that shimmered with a faint blue glow. He was speaking quickly, his three-fingered hands moving in what Nari recognized as gestures of distress. "We send this message to all peaceful species in known space," Veltis said, his voice translator making his words sound hollow. "The Krathis swarm has entered our territory. We have no weapons that can stop them. Our people are dying. Our colonies are burning. We beg for humanitarian assistance, medical supplies, evacuation ships, any help you can provide." The transmission showed images from Valerian colonies, cities with beautiful crystal towers, now cracked and broken. Crowds of civilians running through streets while dark shapes moved in the sky above them. The Krathis looked like a living nightmare, all teeth and claws and hunger. Taiho's jaw tightened. Nari had worked with him for 5 years and knew that look. It meant someone was about to have a very bad day. "How many casualties?" Taiho asked quietly. "Their estimates put it at 4 million in the first 3 weeks, Nari replied. She pulled up additional data on her tablet. "The Valerians are a peaceful species, Captain. They evolved on a low-gravity world with almost no predators. Their idea of conflict resolution is a strongly worded diplomatic note. And the Krathis? A hive mind. They consume everything in their path. 12 star systems have gone dark in the past 3 months. They don't negotiate. They don't stop. They just eat." Taiho nodded slowly. He had fought the Krathis once before, 15 years ago on the edge of human space. Back then, it was just a small cluster that had wandered too close. The fleet had burned them out in 2 days. These numbers suggested something much larger. "What are they asking for specifically?" Taiho asked. Nari scrolled through the transmission details. Medical supplies, prefabricated shelters, food synthesizers, and transport ships for evacuation. They've studied our public records. They know Earth has a tradition of humanitarian relief. "They studied our public records," Taiho repeated with a slight smile. "Did they happen to read the parts about how we handle existential threats?" "I don't think they got that far, sir." Taiho walked to the communications console and opened a secure channel to Earth Command. The connection took a moment to establish. When the screen cleared, Admiral Yuna's face appeared. She was younger than Taiho, but she had made Admiral at 40 by being absolutely brilliant at strategic warfare. "Captain Taiho," Yuna said, "I assume you've received the Valerian transmission?" "Yes, Admiral. I'm looking at it now." "Good. The Security Council met 2 hours ago. We're authorizing a full military response." Yuna's expression was calm, but her eyes held that same look Taiho had. The look that said someone had made a terrible mistake. "You're closest to Valerian space. Hold position and wait for the fleet." "How long until they arrive?" 6 days. We're pulling ships from the 2nd and 3rd Expeditionary Forces. "This ends now, Captain. We're not letting another species get consumed by these things." The transmission ended. Taiho stood quietly for a moment, then turned to Nari. "Draft a response to the Valerians. Tell them help is coming. Don't give them specifics yet." "Sir, should we warn them about what's coming?" "Would you believe it if someone told you?" Nari considered that. The Valerians had asked for medical supplies and evacuation ships. They were about to get the 3rd Terran Expeditionary Force, which included enough firepower to sterilize a small planet. No, she decided, they probably wouldn't believe it. She recorded a simple message. "Ambassador Velthis, this is Diplomat Neri of the United Nations Ship Horizon's Edge. We have received your request for humanitarian assistance. Help is on the way. Please stand by for fleet arrival in 6 standard days. Keep your people safe until then. Humanity hears your call. The message was sent. Now came the hard part. Waiting. Over the next 6 days, the Valerians sent more transmissions. Each one was more desperate than the last. The Creethies had taken 3 more colonies. The death toll was climbing. Veltis appeared thinner each time, his glow dimmer. His people were losing hope. Nari watched every transmission. She had a daughter back on Earth, just turned 7. She thought about how she would feel if someone threatened her child. That cold anger that every human parent knew. That ancient instinct that said, protect the young, destroy the threat, show no mercy. She understood now why the Security Council had acted so fast. The Valerians weren't human, but they were victims. They were calling for help. And humanity had learned long ago that sometimes the most humanitarian thing you could do was to completely eliminate the threat. On the 6th day, Taiho called her to the bridge. Fleet's arriving, he said simply. Nari followed him and took her station. The main display showed empty space near Valerian Prime. Then the sensors started screaming. Ships dropped out of faster-than-light travel in perfect formation. One after another. Dreadnoughts that massed more than small moons. Carriers launching fighter wings. Cruisers bristling with weapons. Destroyers moving in attack patterns. 67 warships. The 3rd Terran Expeditionary Force had arrived in full strength. The flagship was the UNS Indomitable, Admiral Yuna's personal command ship. It was 3 kilometers long, built in the Mars orbital shipyards from asteroid iron and human determination. It carried enough weapons to fight a war by itself. A transmission came through from Valerian Prime. Ambassador Velthis appeared on screen, his large eyes even wider than usual. His translator struggled to process his words. We asked for medical ships? Admiral Yuna's face appeared on a second screen. She smiled, but it wasn't a comforting smile. It was the smile of a predator that had just found prey. You'll get your medical ships, Ambassador. We brought 12 fully equipped hospital vessels. But first, we're going to remove your pest problem. Humanity doesn't just send relief. We make sure no further relief is ever needed. Veltis seemed unable to speak. Behind him, other Valerians were staring at their own sensors, trying to process what they were seeing. Nari understood their shock. The Valerians had expected a few supply ships, maybe some doctors. Instead, they got humanity's response to existential threats. They got the full weight of 3 centuries of military development by a species that had climbed to the top of Earth's food chain. They anticipated aid. They were about to witness what Deathworlders called overwhelming force. The sky above Valerian Prime changed in an instant. One moment, it held only their pale sun and the distant stars. The next moment, it was filled with human warships. Ambassador Veltis stood in the observation tower of the Planetary Council building, staring upward with his mouth open. Around him, other Valerian officials pressed against the windows, their bioluminescent skin flickering with stress patterns. How many? Someone whispered. 67 capital ships, the sensor technician replied, her voice shaking. And, counting smaller vessels now, over 300 fighter craft, 200 support ships. By the ancestors, there are more human ships up there than our entire civilian fleet. Veltis tried to find words. His species had prepared for a relief convoy. They had cleared landing pads for cargo ships. They had medical staff ready to help unload supplies. They had not prepared for this. The human flagship hung in orbit like a small moon. The Indomitable was larger than anything the Valerians had ever built. Its hull was scarred from old battles, patched and repaired, but still functional. Still deadly. Weapons ports lined its surface like the scales of some ancient predator. A communication channel opened. Admiral Yuna appeared on the screens throughout the tower. She wore a dark blue uniform with more medals than Veltis could count. Her face was calm, her eyes sharp. She looked like someone who had made difficult decisions and slept well afterward. Ambassador Veltis, Yuna said, I'm Admiral Yuna of the 3rd Terran Expeditionary Force. We've received your request for assistance. Admiral, Veltis managed to say, We are grateful, but we asked for medical supplies and evacuation ships, not a battle fleet, Yuna finished for him. I understand your confusion. Let me explain how humanity handles humanitarian crises. We don't just treat symptoms, Ambassador. We eliminate the disease. Before Veltis could respond, alarms began blaring. The Krethis had detected the human fleet. They were coming. The Krethis swarm had been confident. They had consumed 12 star systems without serious resistance. The Valrians were easy prey, soft and slow, and unprepared for real violence. The swarm's ships moved through space like a dark cloud, thousands of organic vessels growing and breeding and hunting. They descended on Valrian Prime, expecting another easy meal. Instead, they met humanity. The human fleet didn't wait for the Krethis to attack first. Admiral Yuna gave one simple order. Weapons free. Kill them all. Hana watched from her station in the Indomitable's engineering bay. She was the chief engineer, responsible for keeping the massive ship's systems running during combat. Her screens showed power flowing to the main batteries, the fusion cores running at full capacity, the shield generators spinning up to combat levels. All weapons charged, she reported. Ready to fire on your command, Admiral. Fire, Yuna said. The Indomitable's main rail cannons spoke. They accelerated metal slugs to a fraction of light speed using magnetic fields that could tear a ship apart if they malfunctioned. The slugs crossed the distance to the Krethis swarm in seconds. The first Krethis ships simply ceased to exist. The kinetic impact turned them into clouds of organic matter and steam. The swarm had never encountered weapons like this. Their bioarmor, designed to absorb energy weapons and regenerate, was useless against solid projectiles traveling at relativistic speeds. The rest of the fleet joined in. Plasma lances carved through Krethis formations. Missile swarms overwhelmed their point defenses. Fighter wings dove into the enemy cloud, their pilots laughing and joking over the communication channels like this was just another training exercise. Veltis watched from the surface, his hands pressed against the window. The space above his planet had become a battlefield, and the Krethis were losing badly. They're not even slowing down, one of his aides said in wonder. The humans. They're hunting them. That was exactly what it looked like. The human ships moved with purpose, cutting off escape routes, herding the Krethis into kill zones, working together like a pack of predators that had done this 1,000 times before. Doyen pulled his fighter into a hard turn, the G-forces pressing him into his seat despite the inertial dampeners. He was one of the Third Fleet's best pilots, with 47 confirmed kills in 3 different conflicts. Today was going to add a lot more to that count. Red 3, you've got 2 on your tail, his wingman called. I see them, Doyen replied. He cut his engines, let his fighter spin, then fired his thrusters at full power. The maneuver would have killed most species. Humans had evolved in Earth's gravity, which was twice what most spacefaring species considered normal. Their inner ears and circulatory systems could handle forces that would make other species black out. Doyen's fighter reversed direction in seconds. The 2 Krethis ships following him suddenly found themselves in front of him instead of behind. His weapons locked on. He fired. Both targets exploded. Splash 2, Doyen reported, moving to assist Gold Squadron. The battle lasted 4 hours. When it ended, the Krethis swarm had lost every ship they had sent to Valrian Prime. Not damaged, not driven off, destroyed completely. The human fleet remained in perfect formation, barely scratched. Veltis received another communication from Admiral Yuna. She looked exactly the same as before the battle. Not tired, not stressed, just calm and professional. The immediate threat has been eliminated, Yuna reported. We're beginning landing operations now. Medical teams will touch down in 30 minutes. Engineering Corps will start repairs on your damaged infrastructure immediately. Food and supply distribution will begin within the hour. I don't understand, Veltis said quietly. You came here to fight, but you also brought everything we asked for. Of course, Yuna replied, as if it was obvious. You asked for humanitarian aid. We brought it. But we also brought the means to ensure you'll never need to ask again. That's how humanity works, Ambassador. We protect our friends completely. The first human ships began landing. They were enormous transports, each one carrying enough supplies to sustain a city for months. Medical ships touched down near hospitals, and human doctors in white uniforms began moving out with equipment the Valrians had never seen before. But alongside the relief, workers came the soldiers. Marines in powered armor, carrying weapons that looked more like industrial equipment than small arms. Engineers with tools that could cut through starship hulls. Technicians who moved with the confidence of people who had solved impossible problems before and would again. Jiho stepped off the transport ramp and looked around Valrian Prime's capital city. The buildings were beautiful, all crystal and light, though many were damaged from Krethis attacks. The Valrians watching from a distance looked terrified. Not of the Krethis anymore. Of the humans. He couldn't blame them. His marines looked like walking nightmares. 2 meters tall in their armor, carrying enough firepower to level a building. They moved with mechanical precision, securing the landing zone, setting up defensive positions, establishing a perimeter. "Sir," one of his sergeants reported, "the locals are scared of us." "I know," Jiho said. He removed his helmet, hoping his face might be less intimidating than the armor. It probably didn't help much. "Set up the aid distribution points. Show them we're here to help." Within hours, the human presence transformed Valrian Prime. Medical stations appeared in every district. Food distribution centers opened. Engineers worked on damaged buildings with tools that seemed like magic to the Valrians. But surrounding it all was the fleet. Hanging in orbit like silent guardians. A promise and a threat. Veltis walked through a human medical station, watching doctors treat Valrian children injured in the attacks. The humans were gentle with them, speaking softly, using equipment that healed wounds in minutes instead of days. He found Bora, one of the lead medical officers, working on a young Valrian girl with a broken arm. The bone was already being knitted back together by some kind of cellular regeneration device. "Your technology is incredible," Veltis said. Bora looked up and smiled. "We developed a lot of it during our expansion into space. When you're living on colony worlds far from help, you learn to fix problems quickly. And your weapons?" Her smile faded slightly. "We developed those even earlier. Humans have been fighting each other for our entire history, Ambassador. We're very good at it. Too good sometimes. But we're also very good at protecting those who can't protect themselves." Veltis nodded slowly, beginning to understand. These humans were dangerous, yes. Terrifyingly so. But that danger was directed outward, at threats, at enemies. Not at the Valrians. That night, as he stood in his office and looked up at the human fleet, Veltis realized something. The Krethis had made a terrible mistake. They had threatened someone humanity decided to protect. The Krethis swarm did not understand retreat. Their genetic memory held millions of years of successful expansion, consuming world after world, species after species. Nothing had ever stopped them for long. So when their fleet at Valrian Prime was destroyed, they did not withdraw. They sent more. 3 days after the human fleet arrived, the sensors detected a massive Krethis force dropping out of faster-than-light travel. This was not a raiding party. This was the main swarm fleet, thousands of ships strong, enough biomass to consume an entire planet. The Valrians panicked. Even with the human fleet in orbit, the numbers were terrifying. The Krethis outnumbered the humans 20-1. Admiral Yuna stood on the bridge of the Indomitable and smiled. "Finally," she said, "a real fight." Her tactical officer looked at the sensor readings and shook his head. "Admiral, they're jamming our long-range communications. They've learned from the last battle. They're trying to isolate us." "Good," Yuna replied. "That means they won't call for help when we start killing them. All ships. Battle formation Delta. Fighters launch immediately. Let's show them what happens when you threaten our friends." The human fleet moved with mechanical precision. The massive dreadnoughts formed a wall between the Krethis and Valrian Prime. Carriers launched wave after wave of fighters. Cruisers spread out to cover the flanks. It looked like a defensive formation to the Valrians watching from below. The Krethis recognized it for what it really was. A trap. They charged forward, their organic ships pulsing with bioacid weapons and razor-sharp boarding pods. They had fought hundreds of species and always won through overwhelming numbers in savage close combat. They expected the humans to fall back, to try to defend, to eventually be overwhelmed. The humans did not fall back. They advanced. Doyen led his fighter squadron directly into the Krethis cloud. His cockpit displays showed hundreds of targets, all closing fast. His weapon systems tracked multiple enemies at once, the combat computer struggling to prioritize threats. He didn't need the computer. He had human instincts. Reflexes evolved from millions of years of hunting and being hunted on Earth. He could see patterns in the chaos, predict movements, find weaknesses. Red Squadron, break by pairs, he ordered. Use the asteroid field to the north. Make them chase you. His wingman stayed close as they dove toward a cluster of dead rocks floating in space. The Krethis followed, dozens of ships trying to corner two small fighters. They were fast, but Doyen was faster. He pulled maneuvers that would kill most pilots using gravity assists from asteroids, cutting his engines and drifting, then firing thrusters at angles that seemed impossible. The Krethis crashed into each other, trying to follow. Doyen's wingman picked them off one by one as they recovered. "This is almost too easy," his wingman laughed. "Don't get cocky," Doyen warned. But he was smiling too. The Krethis were dangerous, but they fought on instinct, following programmed behaviors. Humans fought with creativity, adapting every second, trying new things just to see what worked. On the Indomitable, Hana watched her engineering displays with satisfaction. The ship's weapon systems were performing perfectly. The fusion cores were running hot but stable. The shields were cycling properly, distributing damage across multiple layers. "Engineering to bridge," she reported. "We can maintain this firing rate for another 6 hours before we need to cool down." "Noted," Yuna replied. "But we won't need 6 hours." She was right. The Krethis swarm was discovering that numbers didn't matter when you were fighting an enemy that could kill you from hundreds of kilometers away. Human rail cannons punched through Krethis bio-armor like it was paper. Plasma weapons burned through their organic hulls faster than they could regenerate. Missile swarms overwhelmed their defenses with sheer volume of fire. And when the Krethis tried to close to boarding range, they met the human point defense systems. Automated cannons that could track and destroy thousands of targets per second. Laser grids that created kill zones. No organic ship could survive. The few Krethis pods that made it through found human ships covered in armor designed to survive re-entry through planetary atmospheres. But the real nightmare for the Krethis came when some of their ships actually managed to board a human vessel. Jiho had been waiting for this. His Marines were stationed throughout the fleet, ready for close combat. When the first Krethis boarding pod punched through the hull of a human destroyer, alarms screamed throughout the ship. "Boarders, Deck 7, the ship's computer announced calmly. "Sealing affected sections. Defense teams responding." Jiho and his squad ran through the corridors in their powered armor. Each suit made them faster, stronger, nearly invulnerable. They carried weapons designed to work in the tight confines of a spaceship. Shotguns loaded with explosive rounds. Plasma cutters, monomolecular blades. The Krethis that poured through the breach were individually terrifying. 2 meters tall, covered in natural armor plates, with claws that could tear through metal and jaws that could bite through bone. They had evolved to be perfect killing machines. They had never fought humans in close combat before. Jiho's first shotgun blast caught the lead Krethis in the chest and exploded, sending organic matter splattering across the corridor. His Marines opened fire in coordinated volleys, each shot precisely aimed, no wasted ammunition. The Krethis charged. It was their only tactic, the one that had worked for millions of years. Rush the enemy, overwhelm them with teeth and claws, tear them apart before they could react. But humans had reflexes that most species couldn't match. Humans had evolved hunting in packs, coordinating without words, reading each other's movements instinctively. And these particular humans had trained together for years. Jiho sidestepped a charging Krethis, his armor servos making him faster than any unaugmented being could move. His blade cut through the creature's neck in one smooth motion. His sergeant shot 2 more. His corporal used a plasma cutter to seal the breach while the squad provided covering fire. The whole fight lasted 90 seconds. 12 Krethis dead. 0 human casualties. "Breach secured," Jiho reported. "Ready for next contact." Across the fleet, the same story repeated. Every Krethis boarding attempt failed. The humans fought with a combination of advanced technology and savage efficiency that the swarm had never encountered. On Valrian Prime, Bora worked in the medical station as the battle raged overhead. Injured humans were brought down occasionally, but surprisingly few. Most wounds were minor. Cuts, bruises, a few broken bones from close combat. Nothing life-threatening. She treated a young Marine who had fought off 3 Krethis single-handedly. His armor was scratched and dented, but he was smiling. "Doc, you should have seen it," he said. "They're tough, but they fight stupid. All instinct, no thinking. We just outmaneuvered them." Bora cleaned a cut on his arm and applied synthetic skin. It would heal completely in a day. "You're all crazy," she said, but she was smiling too. Fighting creatures like that with such small numbers. "Small numbers," the Marine laughed. "Doc, we're humans. We're apex predators from a death world. 3 of us is a hunting pack." A full Marine squad? That's an extinction event. Bora had heard humans describe Earth before. Higher gravity than most worlds, extreme weather, predators at every level of the food chain, diseases that could kill millions. Humans had survived all of it, evolved through it, came out stronger. Looking at this young Marine, barely 20 years old, she understood why the Krethis were losing. They were predators too, but they had evolved in a universe with easier prey. They had never faced something that could fight back with human intensity. The battle continued for another 3 hours. The Krethis kept throwing ships at the human fleet, kept trying new tactics, kept losing. Their swarm intelligence was learning, but not fast enough. Every strategy they tried, the humans countered within minutes. Finally, something new happened. Something the Krethis genetic memory had no reference for. They retreated. The swarm ships that were still functional broke off combat and fled into faster-than-light travel. They abandoned their wounded, their damaged ships, everything. They just ran. On the Indomitable's bridge, the tactical officer looked at Admiral Yuna in shock. "Admiral, they're withdrawing. The Krethis are actually retreating." Yuna nodded slowly. "Track their trajectory. Find out where they're going." "Ma'am, should we pursue?" "Not yet. Let them think they've escaped." Yuna pulled up a communication channel to the fleet. "All ships, status report, damage assessment, casualty count." The reports came back quickly. Minimal damage across the fleet. 17 ships with minor hull breaches. 3 fighters lost. Human casualties, 23 wounded, 2 critical, 0 dead. Krethis casualties, approximately 4,000 ships destroyed or disabled. Estimated crew losses in the millions. It wasn't a battle. It was a massacre. On Valrian Prime, Velthus watched the human fleet regroup in orbit. The ships that had been damaged were already being repaired, human engineering teams working with frightening efficiency. The fighters were landing for refueling and rearming. The humans weren't celebrating. They were preparing for what came next. Velthus realized with cold certainty that this wasn't over. The humans had driven off the Krethis, yes. But they weren't satisfied with that. They were going to hunt them down. And the Krethis, for all their millions of years of evolution, had no idea what was coming for them. The meeting room in the Valrian Council building was filled with confusion and fear. Ambassador Velthus sat at the head of the table, surrounded by his advisors and planetary leaders. On the large display screen, Admiral Yuna's face waited patiently while they argued. "The Krethis are gone," one council member insisted. "They retreated. We're saved. Why would the humans need to pursue them?" "Because they'll come back," another replied. "Maybe not now, but eventually. The Krethis always come back." Velthus raised a hand for silence. "Admiral Yuna, please explain your intentions." Yuna's expression remained calm and professional. "The Krethis swarm is a threat to all peaceful species in this sector. They've consumed 12 star systems. They attacked you. They will attack others. We have an opportunity to end this threat permanently, and we're going to take it." "But they're retreating," Velthus said. "You've won. You've saved us. Isn't that enough?" "No," Yuna replied simply. "Ambassador, let me ask you something. If you had a disease, would you want the doctor to treat the symptoms or cure the disease completely? Cure it, of course. Exactly. The Creathies are a disease. We're going to eliminate them at the source. We've already received authorization from Earth Command. The Third Fleet will pursue the swarm to their breeding worlds and destroy every trace of them. The room erupted in shocked voices. The Valrians had never heard of such a thing. Pursuing a defeated enemy across multiple star systems, hunting them down, deliberately making a species extinct. It went against everything their peaceful culture believed in. Nari, who had been standing quietly in the corner, stepped forward. Ambassador, I understand this is difficult for your people to accept. Your species evolved without significant predators. You don't have the instincts we do. But please try to understand our perspective. She pulled up a holographic display showing Earth's history, images of ancient humans hunting massive animals, fighting off predators, surviving ice ages and droughts and plagues. My ancestors learned a hard lesson, Nari continued. If you wound a dangerous predator and let it escape, it comes back stronger. It adapts. It learns. And next time, you might not win. The only way to truly protect yourself is to eliminate the threat completely. Not because we're cruel, but because we're survivors. Velthus looked at the images of Earth's violent history and felt a chill. These humans had lived through conditions that would have killed any Valrian in days. They had made it to the top of their food chain through pure, stubborn determination and willingness to do whatever it took to survive. What if we asked you not to go? He asked quietly. What if we said, we don't want this on our conscience? Yuna's expression softened slightly. Then we would respect that this troubles you. But we would still go. Because this isn't just about you anymore, Ambassador. It's about every species the Creathies might attack next, every colony that might burn, every child that might die. We have the power to stop it, so we have the responsibility to use that power. The Council voted. It was close, but they ultimately agreed not to interfere with the human plans. They didn't approve exactly, but they understood they couldn't stop it anyway. The human fleet prepared for departure. Half the ships would remain to protect Valrian space. The other half, led by Admiral Yuna on the Indomitable, would hunt down the Creathies. Siwu sat in the intelligence center of the flagship, surrounded by holographic displays showing data from 1,000 different sources. He was a quiet man who preferred computers to people, which made him perfect for intelligence work. His job was to find the Creathies breeding worlds. Got a trail, he reported to Admiral Yuna. The retreating ships left traces we can follow. Organic matter degradation, specific radiation signatures. I can track them. How many jumps? Yuna asked. 4 star systems away. There's a cluster of 3 planets in the habitable zone, perfect for Crethis breeding. High probability that's where they're regrouping. Excellent work. Send the coordinates to navigation. Captain Taiho commanded the Vanguard group, 5 fast cruisers that would scout ahead of the main fleet. His ship, the Horizon's Edge, dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the system Siwu had identified. What they found made even Taiho's experienced crew fall silent. The system was filled with Creathies, not just ships, but entire planets covered in their organic structures. Breeding pools that stretched across continents. Hive clusters the size of cities. The swarm had turned 3 worlds into factories for producing more of themselves. Estimated Crethis population, his tactical officer said quietly, is in the billions. Taiho nodded slowly. Get me detailed scans. Weak points, defensive positions, everything. Then we get out of here before they notice us. They spent 6 hours gathering intelligence, their ships using every stealth system they had. Then they jumped back to rejoin the main fleet. Admiral Yuna studied the data with her command staff. The Creathies had fortified this system heavily. Thousands of defense platforms, swarms of ships ready to launch. This wasn't going to be another easy battle. Recommendations? She asked. Her chief tactical officer highlighted several areas on the holographic display. The breeding pools are their weak point. They're not well defended because the Creathies never expected anyone to attack their core worlds. If we can destroy the pools, we stop them from reproducing. Cut off their future generations. And the current generation? We kill every last one of them, Una approved the plan. The fleet would strike hard and fast, targeting the breeding pools first. No mercy. No half measures. Complete elimination. The attack began at dawn on the largest Krethis world. The human fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel, already firing. Kinetic bombardment from orbit, massive metal rods accelerated to tremendous speeds. They hit the breeding pools like the fist of an angry god. The pools exploded, organic matter vaporizing instantly. Billions of Krethis eggs and larvae died in seconds. The swarm's genetic memory had no protocol for this level of devastation. The Krethis ships launched from the planet's surface, thousands of them, all focused on protecting what remained of their breeding grounds. They threw themselves at the human fleet with desperate fury. This time, the battle was harder. The Krethis were defending their home, their future, their species' survival. They fought with suicidal determination, ramming human ships when their weapons failed, trying to board anything they could reach. But desperation wasn't enough. Doyen led his squadron through the atmosphere of the Krethis world, dodging ground-based defenses and swarms of enemy fighters. His mission was to destroy the secondary breeding pools, the ones too deep underground for orbital bombardment. "Red Leader, you're going too low," his wingman warned. "I know," Doyen replied. He dropped his fighter to just 50 meters above the surface, weaving between organic towers and biostructures. Krethis anti-air fire filled the sky around him. But he had trained for this. Humans had faster reflexes than most species, better hand-eye coordination, brains that could process multiple threats simultaneously. He found his target, a massive breeding complex built into a canyon. He armed his bunker buster missiles and fired. The missiles punched through hundreds of meters of organic armor before detonating inside the complex. The explosion was visible from orbit. Another billion Krethis young died instantly. Jiho and his marines deployed to the planet's surface in heavily armored dropships. Their mission was to destroy Krethis command nodes, the organic structures that coordinated the swarm's hive mind. It was dangerous work, fighting the Krethis on their own ground. But humans were good at dangerous work. The Marines moved through the alien landscape in small teams, each group supporting the others. They fought with ruthless efficiency, using their armor's strength and their own combat skills to overwhelm any Krethis they encountered. Jiho planted demolition charges on a massive neural cluster, a pulsing tower of organic matter that helped coordinate thousands of Krethis ships. He set the timer for 30 seconds and ran. The explosion tore through the structure, and across the planet, hundreds of Krethis ships suddenly lost coordination. They crashed into each other, flew erratically, became easy targets for human weapons. The battle for the Krethis home system lasted 5 days. It was brutal, exhausting work. The humans took casualties this time. 3 ships destroyed, 15 fighters lost, 243 dead, over 1,000 wounded. But when it was over, the Krethis breeding worlds were burning. Their population was reduced by 90%. Their ability to reproduce was destroyed. Their fleet was shattered. Admiral Una stood on the bridge of the Indomitable and watched the last Krethis stronghold fall. There was no satisfaction in her expression, just grim determination. "Siwu," she called. "Scan the entire system. Find every Krethis egg, every larva, every ship that's trying to escape. I want them all." "Ma'am," Siwu replied quietly. "Are we really going to kill them all? Make them extinct?" Una was silent for a moment. Then she pulled up images of Valerian children in the medical centers. Images of the 12 star systems the Krethis had consumed. Images of billions of dead from dozens of species. "Yes," she said, "we are. Because if we leave even one breeding pair alive, this starts all over again in 100 years, and I won't let that happen." It took another week to complete the mission. Human ships hunted down every Krethis vessel trying to flee. Marines searched every cave and tunnel for hidden eggs. Orbital bombardment sterilized every breeding ground. When it was done, the Krethis swarm was extinct. A species that had terrorized the galaxy for millions of years was gone, eliminated in less than a month by humanity's methodical determination. The fleet began its journey back to Valerian space. They had lost people. They had done terrible things, but they had also saved countless lives across the galaxy. That night, Nari sat in her quarters and wrote letters to the families of the dead. It was her job as the fleet's diplomat, explaining why their loved ones had died so far from home. She told them the truth. They died protecting others. They died ending a threat. They died doing what humans do best, surviving and making sure others could survive too. It didn't make it easier, but it made it matter. 3 months after the first desperate message from Valerian Prime, the human fleet returned. They came back quietly, without fanfare, their ships showing the scars of hard fighting. New patches covered hull breaches. Replacement parts had been installed on damaged systems. The fleet looked tired but victorious. Ambassador Veltus stood in the same observation tower where he had first watched the humans arrive. This time, his feelings were different. He wasn't afraid anymore. He was grateful, and also deeply troubled. The Krethi swarm was gone. Completely. Humanity had made an entire species extinct in less than a month of focused warfare. It was the kind of thing the Valerians had thought impossible. The kind of thing their philosophy said was morally wrong. But it had also saved his people. Saved countless other species. And that made everything complicated. Admiral Una requested a meeting with the Valerian Council. This time, when she appeared on the display screens, she looked tired. There were new lines around her eyes, and her uniform had a memorial ribbon for the dead. "Ambassador," she said simply, "the threat has been eliminated. The Krethi's breeding worlds are destroyed. We tracked down every ship that tried to escape. There are no survivors. It's over." The council chamber was silent. Finally, one of the younger council members spoke. "You made them extinct. An entire species." "Yes," Una replied without hesitation. "We did. They were a threat to all peaceful life in this region of space. They had to be stopped permanently. But surely there could have been another way. Containment, relocation, something other than genocide." Una's expression hardened slightly. "With respect, Councilman, your people have never faced a true existential threat before. You don't understand what it takes to survive against something that wants to consume you completely. We do. Earth taught us that lesson over and over. Sometimes the most merciful thing you can do for the universe is to completely remove a threat." Nari stepped forward to soften the Admiral's words. "What Admiral Una means is that humanity has learned from painful experience. We tried containment before, with other dangerous species. It never works. They always find a way to break out, to adapt, to return. The Krethis had already consumed 12 star systems. How many more should we have let them destroy while we tried to find a nicer solution?" Veltus raised a hand for calm. "We understand. We don't necessarily approve, but we understand. And we are grateful. You saved us. What happens now?" "Now," Una said, "we finish what we started. We came here to provide humanitarian aid. We've brought medical supplies, construction materials, food synthesizers, everything you requested. We've also prepared a defense plan to protect your space from future threats." Over the next weeks, the human fleet began a controlled withdrawal. But they didn't leave the Valerians defenseless. Teams of engineers and military advisors stayed behind, working with the Valerian government on a comprehensive defense plan. Jiho spent his days training Valerian security forces. It was strange work. The Valerians were naturally peaceful, their bodies not built for combat. He couldn't turn them into warriors like his Marines. "You don't need to be warriors," he told a group of trainees. "You need to be smart, use technology, build better sensors, install automated defenses, create early warning systems, and most importantly, learn to ask for help before it's too late." One young Valerian raised a hand. "But what if help doesn't come in time?" "Then you delay," Jiho replied. "You evacuate civilians. You protect the young and the old. You buy time any way you can. Because humans made you a promise. If you call for help, we will come. And we will bring overwhelming force." He meant it. Earth Command had already authorized the construction of a rapid response base in a nearby system. If the Valerians ever faced another threat, human ships could arrive within days instead of weeks. Bora worked with Valerian medical staff, teaching them advanced trauma care techniques. The Valerians had excellent doctors for normal medicine, but they had never needed to know how to treat combat injuries, radiation burns, or the effects of biological weapons. I hope you never use this knowledge, Bora told her students. But it's better to have it and not need it than to need it and not have it. She also helped establish 3 permanent medical research stations on Valerian Prime. They would study diseases and injuries, share data with Earth's medical network, and advance both species' understanding of xenobiology. The work was rewarding. She saw Valerian children playing in parks that had been battlefields, families returning to rebuilt homes, cities coming back to life. That was why she had joined the fleet's medical corps, not to fight, but to heal. Nari took on the most challenging job, establishing a permanent diplomatic relationship between humanity and the Valerian Consortium. She was appointed as Earth's first official ambassador to the Valerians. It meant staying behind when the fleet left, setting up an embassy, learning Valerian customs and language, building bridges between 2 very different cultures. She met with Veltis regularly, discussing everything from trade agreements to cultural exchange programs. The Valerians were fascinated by human art and literature. Humans were equally interested in Valerian science and philosophy, but there were difficulties too. The Valerians struggled to understand human military culture, the casual acceptance of violence, the jokes soldiers made about combat. Humans found Valerian pacifism frustrating sometimes, their inability to even conceive of necessary violence. "We are very different species," Veltis said during one of their meetings. "Yes," Nari agreed. "But that's okay. Different doesn't mean we can't work together. You have things to teach us: patience, peaceful conflict resolution, finding diplomatic solutions. And we have things to teach you." "How to kill efficiently?" Veltis asked with a hint of bitterness. "How to protect what matters," Nari replied gently. "How to survive against impossible odds. How to make the hard choices when there are no good options." Veltis sighed. "I suppose we need both perspectives. Peace and the ability to defend peace." Exactly. Admiral Yuna prepared to depart with the main fleet. Before she left, she recorded a message for the Galactic Council, the loose organization of spacefaring species that governed interstellar relations. "This is Admiral Yuna of the United Nations 3rd Expeditionary Force. I am transmitting a formal report on the Krethis situation. The swarm has been eliminated as a threat. We took this action to protect the Valerian Consortium and prevent future attacks on peaceful species." She paused, choosing her next words carefully. "Let this serve as notice to all species in known space. Humanity takes the protection of our allies seriously. We will respond to threats against them with overwhelming force. We prefer peace, but we are fully prepared for war. Any species that targets our friends will face the consequences." It wasn't a threat exactly. It was a promise and a warning. The message spread across the galaxy within days. Species that had viewed humanity with curiosity now viewed them with respect, and some with fear. The Valerian Consortium sent their own message to the Galactic Council. It was more diplomatic than Yuna's, but the content was clear. Humanity has been classified as a Deathworlder species. They are capable of extreme violence when threatened or when protecting others. However, they are also capable of great compassion and honor their agreements. We recommend approaching them with respect and honesty. On the last day before the fleet departed, Veltis stood with Nari on one of Valerian Prime's restored observation platforms. Above them, the human ships were preparing to leave. The massive dreadnoughts, the sleek cruisers, the carriers with their fighter wings. "I still don't understand you," Veltis admitted. "Your people. You bring such destruction, but also such hope. You kill without hesitation, but you also heal with dedication. You are contradictions." Nari smiled. "We're human. We contain multitudes. We're the descendants of people who survived ice ages and plagues and wars. We learn to be compassionate because we know what suffering is. We learn to be fierce because we know what it takes to survive. Both are necessary. Will you really come if we call again?" "Yes, without hesitation." That's another thing humans learned. We're stronger together. We protect our friends, our allies, our families. It's instinctive for us. The fleet departed the next morning. One by one, the ships activated their faster-than-light drives and vanished. Within an hour, Valrian space was quiet again. But orbiting above the planet were 6 defensive platforms, human-built and human-maintained. In the embassy, human staff worked alongside Valrians. In the hospitals, human medical equipment saved lives every day. In the training centers, Valrian security forces learned new skills. And in a hidden facility on the edge of the system, a quantum communication relay stood ready. One button press would send a signal directly to Earth Command, a call for help that would be answered within days. The Valrians had anticipated aid. They got something better. They got an ally. A terrifying, deadly, compassionate, loyal ally. Across the galaxy, other species watched and learned. Some began reaching out to humanity, seeking similar alliances. Others retreated, deciding that humanity was too dangerous to interact with. And a few, the predator species that had viewed the galaxy as their hunting ground, began to reconsider their strategies. Because the Krethys swarm had been one of the most successful predators in known space, and humanity had erased them from existence in a month. On Earth, the Security Council reviewed Admiral Yuna's final report. The mission had cost lives, resources, and had established humanity as a major military power in the region. But it had also created a strong alliance and sent a clear message about human intentions. "We can't protect everyone," one council member noted. "No," another agreed, "but we can protect those who call for help. And we can make sure that anyone who threatens our friends thinks twice." The policy was formalized. Humanity would offer alliances based on mutual respect and shared values. They would provide aid when asked, and they would defend their allies with absolute commitment. Years later, the Valrian consortium thrived. Their culture remained peaceful, but they were no longer defenseless. They studied the stars with new confidence, knowing that if they encountered another threat, they had friends who would come. Children in Valrian schools learned about the Krethys War. They learned about the desperate message their leaders sent. They learned about the humans who arrived with warships and medical supplies, who fought with terrifying efficiency and healed with gentle care. And they learned the lesson that their ancestors had paid for. The universe was dangerous, but it was also full of friends. You just had to be brave enough to ask for help. Nari served as ambassador for 20 years. She saw her daughter grow up splitting time between Earth and Valrian Prime, learning both cultures. She watched as human and Valrian scientists made breakthroughs together. She attended the signing of trade agreements, cultural exchanges, joint research projects. And every year, on the anniversary of the fleet's arrival, the Valrians held a remembrance ceremony. They honored the humans who had died fighting the Krethys. They honored their own dead. And they honored the friendship that had been forged in fire and blood, because the Valrians had asked for aid, and they had received something far more valuable. They had received proof that in a dangerous galaxy, there were still species who would fight for others, who would stand against the darkness, who would protect the innocent with absolute determination. They had received humanity's promise, and humans always kept their promises.